Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us for tonight's program. I'm Brent Hurley from the Alumni Relations Team in the College of Health and Human Development at Penn State. And we are very pleased to introduce tonight's speaker, Dr. Mark Feinberg, who is a research professor of health and human development in the Department of Human Development and Family Studies. Dr. Feinberg was one of the first researchers to join the college's Edna Bennett Pierce Prevention Research Center, and he conducts basic and applied prevention research on youth, families, and communities with an emphasis on family-focused prevention. This evening, Dr. Feinberg will discuss how parents can team up to bring down stress, emotional problems, and family conflict, even during a pandemic. If you have questions throughout the program, please submit them using the Q&A box in the menu bar of your Zoom application. Questions will be addressed in the last portion of the program. At this time, Dr. Feinberg, will turn it over to you.
Hello and welcome. I want to let you know this is my first experience giving a talk on Zoom. So we'll see how this goes. And I love feedback. I love interaction. So we'll have to make do. I'm definitely open to having some discussion another time on Zoom if there are other questions you'd like to actually have a discussion about. But I'm going to start. I'll share my screen. And I'm going to start the talk with a larger framework, which is for 100 years, this has been the focus of research and intervention and human services. We've just focused on helping mothers be better mothers. And that is quite a burden to put on one parent. Especially when families are extremely complex, especially these days. So not only do you have a nuclear family, a mother and father or two parents, sorry, and children, but then many people split up, their grandparents in the picture, step siblings. So the traditional focus on that mother-child dyad, even though important, very important, doesn't reflect the complexity of real family life. And the work I've been doing for the last 20 years focuses on the two horizontal relationships in the family, the sibling relationship, which I won't be talking about tonight, but I love to talk about it because it is the most violent relationship in the family, the longest lasting for most people. It has just as much impact on children's development and life course and relationships and work and academics as parenting. And we neglect it, and we know relatively little about it, and we have few tools to address it. But tonight I'm going to be talking about the mother-father relationship. And the talk, first I'm going to set out a few problems that we're trying to address. Then I'm going to talk about my view of co-parenting and how co-parenting is really the critical foundation of the family. And then I'm going to talk about how we've developed programs to help families strengthen positive, supportive co-parenting relationships. So starting with the problems, child maltreatment. By the age of 18, 1 of 3 children in the US are involved in a maltreatment investigation, the subject. And by 18, 1 out of 8 are confirmed, adjudicated as a victim. And 1 out of 5 African-American children, 20% by the age of 18, confirmed by our social service agencies as having been a victim of maltreatment. Much larger problem than we tend to think. We tend to think, oh, 1-2%, very small. There are a lot of children caught up in this very high, intensive service context that aims to deal with the most troubling neglect and physical abuse and sexual abuse cases. But aggression and violence is even more widespread in our families. So the best study on this topic that I know of did anonymous telephone calling with parents with a young child, and 87% said that in the past year, they had enacted some form of physical aggression towards their child. In many cases, it was corporal punishment, spanking, which in many countries is illegal. 13% of parents self-reported that they had enacted behaviors that were severe: beating up, burning, kicking, slamming against a wall, choking, etc. So the nature of violence in families is much more widespread than we think, and it's related to several other factors. First, substance use. Alcohol use increases the likelihood of any kind of family violence by a very large factor. Stress and depression undermines parents' ability to be patient and regulate themselves when they're stressed. And interparental conflict creates a very tense situation in the family. Often it is also physically violent. In that same study, almost half of couples said there had been physical aggression of some sort between them in the past year. So I want to play a little clip to give you the context of interparental conflict and the place of children at times in this. This is from the Dr. Phil TV show.
My kids see a lot of the fighting. My wife is attempting to turn my 3-year-old against me.
Now you can see the parents over in the right-hand side in the kitchen.
My little girl will say things like, "Remember when you punched mommy in the face?"
That bothers me a lot.
My wife tells my little girls, "Daddy doesn't love you anymore. Daddy doesn't care about you."
You only care about yourself. How about like being out with your family? Come on, Maddie. Let's get this.
We are allowing them to see dysfunction at its finest.
Spending the day and getting with your family. Screw this now. You will attend the Don't tell me to shut up. Thank you. I didn't. Yes, you. Thank you. You're really.
Okay, I want to stop it there. It doesn't get more physically violent, but it is disturbing. And you can see that the child is involved, even though they're not paying attention to her, which is another problem that happens when parents are in conflict. She is involving herself. Many times children get involved to try to stop an argument. They call the police. It's not just a passive witnessing and observing that happens for many children. Oops. Okay. So the common factor, and up at the top, this PCA stands for parent to child aggression. So what we're looking for is a common factor that if we target it and if we can help people around it, we'll have a positive influence on all of these things. And that common factor is couple conflict, which itself for 50 years, we've known how destructive it is for children. And here are some of the problems that it's been associated with in research. From early on, making children be less secure in their attachment relationships, school problems, substance use, their peer relationships. So I want to focus in now because couple conflict engenders a very wide range of issues, and every couple has different issues. Often couples have been together for some time, and some of that conflict is entrenched in patterns that are very difficult to disrupt. We have focused, instead of the whole couple relationship, on just the part of the relationship where parents are working together as parents, coordinating, supporting, undermining. This is the subset of the interparental relationship that we've been focused on. And when I began this work, I published 2 conceptual papers. This is a model from one of them, which simply synthesized the emerging literature at that time on co-parenting and delineated 4 overlapping spheres: division of labor, in which the most important thing is how satisfied parents are. It's not an issue of 50-50. It's an issue of how they negotiate. Child rearing agreement, how much they agree or disagree on how they're going to raise their child, how they support and undermine each other. And undermining comes in many, many different flavors. It can be an eye roll. It can be a comment. It can be something said to a child out of the earshot of the other parent. It can be directly in front of the child. And then joint family management, how they are the executive system, the co-executives of the family, responsible for running the family and setting the norms, setting the tone, setting the behaviors that are expected. Here I usually stop for questions. Another reason I focus on the co-parenting relationship is because I do see it as the foundation of a parent's sense of worth, security, and competence. What is more important if you have children? What is the most important thing in your life? What will you sacrifice your life for? Your children are more important than many other factors we can think of. And the person, when parents or caregivers are living together, the person who sees you every day in and out with that child is your co-parent. And their support or undermining is the primary input into your sense of whether you're a good parent or not, especially early with children when they're not giving you positive feedback all the time. Sometimes they're fussy and they're crying and they're difficult and there's a tantrum. And let me just pause and say, I also want to note that this co-parenting idea applies to all adults who are raising a child together. It doesn't have to be mother and father. It doesn't have to be biological parents. They don't have to be related, and they don't have to be living together. But if they're sharing the responsibility for raising that child, then this idea about co-parenting applies. So the research on co-parenting has shown that it's linked to lots of child outcomes, just like couple conflict has been. And here I list some of them. In divorced families, research shows that co-parenting quality, how the divorced parents are supporting or undermining each other, explains 1/3 or more of the variation in divorced parents' mental health. And it also explains 30 to 40% of children's mental health and their substance use and oppositional behavior in their school performance. So the way that parents relate to each other, whether they're living together, whether they're separated, is extremely important. So in order to develop a way, a strategy of supporting parents, we need a conceptual model of what we're trying to do. And so this comes from one of those early papers I did. Very simple model, very simple, but very helpful. So the idea, what I've just been talking about, is that co-parenting influences parents' adjustment, their well-being, their mental health, their stress, and so on. And that influences the quality of their parenting, whether they're patient, whether they're harsh, whether they're neglectful or paying attention. And finally, of course, that influences children's well-being. And co-parenting also directly influences children just by their observation and witnessing of that co-parenting relationship, as we saw before. And then children also influence the nature of co-parenting. We all come with different temperaments. We're born with different temperaments. A child with a temperament that is less flexible, very sensitive to noise or texture or disturbance, or just emotionally not robust and happy all the time, that child takes more energy to parent. And that child also affects the co-parenting relationship because there's more work in the co-parenting relationship that's needed to coordinate and problem solve. Okay, so now I'm down to the last part. I'm going to talk a bit about the prevention program I developed with the help from many people, and the research we've done with it, and all the ways that it's taken on legs of its own since then. So the prevention program is called Family Foundations, and you can see at the top that the main target of Family Foundations is the co-parenting relationship. In the program, we spend very, very little time on how to be a good parent. But you can't bring parents to a program and not talk about parenting. So we do talk about parenting a little bit. And when we do it, it's always in terms of how do you do it together? What are the differences between you? How do you support each other? How do you problem solve? And so on. Not so much, this is the way to be a good parent. Because most parents want to be a good parent. And if they're not stressed and depressed and anxious, they're naturally going to be warmer and less harsh. So that's our tack, and our target is really strictly on co-parenting. And we do this, we target co-parenting amongst new parents who are just having their first child. And you're probably already reading, and I hope you are laughing. Dilbert says, "How's your new baby?" The other person says, "Wonderful, but the lack of sleep is taking a toll on my body. How's Becky doing?" I am Becky. Bob looks worse. So this is an experience that many of us who have been parents have gone through. And so it's not really a transition into parenthood. I call it a crash. Parents are not completely prepared for what it's going to be like. Myself and many other people I've talked to had the idea, oh, we got this down. We're going to be good parents. We get along. We share values. I was a graduate student in psychology. My partner was a family mediator. She had lots of experience with families in conflict. We thought it was going to be, just much easier for us than other people. But parenthood for everybody, most people, not everybody, but most people experience much higher rates of stress, some depressive symptoms, and increase in couple conflict. One study by John Gottman said there was 8 times more conflict after birth than before. And along with that, there's less romance, less affection, less time to be companions together. And the irony of this, in my view, is just when babies and young children need us the most and are most vulnerable, and their physiological, emotional, and all of their self-regulatory systems are developing and coming online and being shaped, that's when parents are most stressed and having the most difficulty and losing the most sleep. So now I'll say a few words about the Family Foundations program itself, what I call the standard version. This is the original version that I developed. First of all, it's developed as a universal program, and that means it's welcomes everybody. It's not targeted just at parents with certain kinds of problems or are poor and less educated or substance use, as many other programs. And it was structured as a series of 5 prenatal classes and 4 postnatal classes. And the reason you might expect or be able to figure that out without me saying is, in the prenatal classes, we lay down some ideas, expectations, strategies, skills, perspectives. And then after they have a child, then they come back and then they know a couple of months later, and then they know what are the issues that they're dealing with, and they can kind of chew on the program a little bit more and digest it, because now it's real, and now they know how and when they need to use certain strategies, and so on. And then the co-leaders, two leaders, 2 facilitators for each group of 8 to 10 couples, a male and female. And I think that it's extremely important. Most family and parenting programs are conducted by women, and that's great, but men often feel left out in home visiting programs, which are have come online with federal support over the last 10 years or so. Those are directed pretty much solely at mothers. And the anecdotes are that when the home visitor comes, the father goes off and finds something to do in the garage. And even when the father is present, the material is not really shaped to include him or to include both of them at the same time. The central idea we want to get across is one of the most important things for your child is how you work together as a team. And that's both because of the way co-parenting affects children directly, but also your partner is going to be a better parent, warmer and more patient, if you're not criticizing and undermining them, if you're working together and coordinating. So the best thing, I like to say, the best thing you can do for your child is have a strong, supportive co-parenting relationship. And we structure the program around 3 main targets: feelings, thoughts, and communication. In feelings, we talk about stress. We do a little mini feelings 101 course, and everything we do, we have to start with the baby and the baby's well-being. And so we talk about how babies come into the world as emotional machines. And over time, they come to learn what their feelings are and how to manage them. And the parent is the central main teacher in that multi-year long process. So that gives us the entree to help parents understand a little bit more about feelings, how to be in touch with feelings, and how to manage them. And that is the basis of self-regulation, to have a good relationship with a partner, with a child, with anybody. Self-regulation is key, and emotional self-regulation is sort of the kernel of that. We have components that deal with thoughts, expectations for what's going to happen after your child is born, thoughts about your partner, and thoughts about your family, and how you can use self-talk to modify those thoughts. And finally, communication. It's very, very simple skills we teach about speaking and listening. Very, very simple turn taking. We talk about problem solving. We do a lot of interactive exercises. And we also have work around coordinating your roles and division of labor and managing that. So feelings, thoughts, communication, FTC. And we use that as a mnemonic, as a tool, because we also say that means first the child. And so when you get upset, remind yourself, what's the most important thing to you? First the child. Okay, stop, take a breath. Now go in, find out what your feelings are, manage those feelings in some way. Then take a look at what those thoughts are that are running through your head, those negative loops perhaps. And then decide how you want to communicate and go on from there. So here we show lots of vignettes of parents, couples with their child, because we want to give expectant parents a sense of the wide range of styles of co-parenting and how parents work together. In the first version of this program, I had a series of clips, very short clips of a parent handing the child over to the other parent. You know, and you had some people where it was a very deliberate, coordinated move, and you take the child and the other one, you know, takes it. There was a second one where one parent just reached over and grabbed the child. And there was a third one where a parent had a child on their lap and they put the child next to them, you know, a young baby toddler, and they got up to go get something and the other parent, you know, picked up the child. So just that, I don't have that available, but it's just really important that we realize there's no one way to do anything. Most of us, you know, we grew up in a family, we learned some things from that family, we have certain expectations, we have certain things that we don't like that we want to do differently from that family. But generally we don't see the wide range of possibilities. Anyway, here's a couple of those. I want to, couple of vignettes.
At the end, we'll share with you some of the things that we observed.
I told you that he was tired. Why did you bring out something for him to eat?
Because I would say he's hungry and tired. Hey, want to eat?
Of course he's going to eat. What child doesn't eat?
Okay, Mommy told Daddy I need to go take a nap. Say, I need to go take a nap.
I think you're hungry. I don't think so.
So why did you go and get food when I told you I wanted to give him a nap?
Because he should probably eat first. He's enjoying it, isn't he?
Yeah, and you'll enjoy staying up with him when he has his belly ache.
I win. Oh,
Rubbing his eyes, that's tired.
That's snot in the nose. Look at that.
He's tired, he's rubbing his eyes.
Yeah.
What's Mama when he gets sleepy?
Daddy turn.
Push her bottom lip down when you do it, and she'll open her mouth. You don't have to get it all over her.
You don't have to do all that. Just push her lip down, push her bottom lip down.
She gotta be able to see it and stuff.
No, she doesn't. If you just put some on the spoon, there's nothing on there. Now push her bottom lip down. Let me show you.
No. Tell me.
Okay, push her bottom lip down. If she doesn't have her, now she has her mouth open, so you can just do it. But Daddy just doesn't listen. Mommy knows everything. I love my mommy.
Look. She look wide open. I know what I'm doing.
I'm just trying to show.
So I love these two clips because, most people see the competitive undermining that goes on in the first couple. And then here, people have differences of opinion. Some people notice the tension between them, but other people, and myself included, see a much more supportive, united couple where the dad, where she says, shall I show you? And he's strong enough to say, no, tell me, let me keep trying here. And then he experiments with both styles and they're discussing it. Even though there's a tad of that competition, it doesn't feel, to me anyway, as undermining and worrisome ultimately for the child. Let's see.
Easier way than going through it.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble just figuring out how, there we go. So we've run 2 randomized trials of the standard version of Family Foundations. And the first one with almost 170 families, the second one with 400 families. And parents, by and large, give us very positive feedback. I'll give you a minute to read these. Now I'll go ahead and read the second one. There have been many times over the last few months that we have said, thank God for Family Foundations. We truly don't think we would have survived without the support and strategies Family Foundations has taught us. But now we feel we are thriving and so excited about our family life together. And this was feedback we got just within the last couple of months during the pandemic period. So I just want to remind you, this is our conceptual model. And in our trials now, we're testing to see whether we have impact on co-parenting, on parent adjustment, on parenting quality, and ultimately on children's well-being. And here I'm going to just show you a very simple summary of lots of research over those 2 trials, 6 months, 1 year, and 3 years after birth, and comparing the randomly assigned intervention families that enrolled in Family Foundations to the control families that didn't, and we gave some education materials to. And basically we found evidence at all time points and across all domains that we were looking at of evidence that we had a positive impact on families and on children, on co-parenting, parent mental health, and parenting quality. And for children's self-regulation, these are at 6 months, 1 year. So these are infants that we're already seeing differences in. We did not expect, there's some things I just did not expect when I began this. We found reductions in couples' aggression with each other and in parenting to child aggression, both non-physical, so shouting, yelling, name calling, and physical aggression. And those are the effect sizes, which I probably won't explain right now, but those are medium to strong effect sizes, pretty large for our field. Now here's some longer term outcomes. And now we're looking here at outcomes at children who are 3 years old. And we found significant difference in favor of the Family Foundation families for children's social competence. And we found that boys, not girls, but boys were less depressed and anxious and exhibited less disruptive behavior. At 7 years of age, and the gray boxes, by the way, are things we did not measure at those ages. At 7 years of age, we asked teachers to report on the children, and the teachers had no idea that they were in a Family Foundation's trial or who was in control. They knew nothing except some researchers asked them to rate a child in their classroom. And we found, again, effects, this time for all children, on depression, anxiety, on boys' disruptive behavior. And we did not find any differences on school factors. But then when we looked at the data again, and we looked at the families who were at slightly higher risk, and the way we measured this was we observed couples at each time point. We went into their homes with video cameras and asked them to interact together and as a family. And during pregnancy, we had the couple have a discussion and address some problems, and we rated how warm or conflictual that was. And for those families where that conversation during pregnancy was tense, I would say, because no families in front of a video are shouting and yelling. So the amount of conflict that you see is pretty mild. But those families where the couple was more tense, when we compared them to similar families in the control group, we found effects for all of their children on depression, disruptive behavior, school adjustment, and their motivation and engagement in learning. So again, our conceptual model, we found good evidence in both trials for impact on all of these domains. Another domain we didn't think to look at were birth outcomes, because I wouldn't think that 5 classes on how to get along would change birth outcomes. But since we started this work, research has shown that depression, anxiety, and stress undermine fetal development in pregnancy. And so when we looked at women who were somewhat more stressed than other women in the sample, we did find effects that there was less premature birth, better birth weight, and shorter hospital stays in the 2 trials. Now, a question we started asking recently is whether early prevention creates long-term resilience in families. So I was just talking about outcomes from birth to age 7. But what about in periods of stress and difficulty, like what we're experiencing now? And shortly after the shelter-in-place mandates came down, we quickly got together measures and surveys, and we got IRB approval, and within 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, we were starting to send out questionnaires, online questionnaires to the parents in this second larger sample. And basically we wanted to know if Family Foundation, now the kids are 8 to 10 years old, so the series of 9 classes, 8 to 10 years ago, did that help the families cope better with this unpredictable period of acute stress? And we looked to see how families are doing in parent mental health and co-parenting. And here's just one quote from a parent who received the program during the pandemic. And they say, "We're just a lot happier with one another, especially now. We see each other 24/7 since we're in lockdown. I'd like to think the program helped us to be able to live with each other in close proximity for such long periods of time without getting on each other's nerves constantly." That's quite an accomplishment. I'd love to take credit, but you can't take credit as a scientist. We can't take credit for anecdotal evidence. I love it. It touches me. But in the world of research and policy and funding, we need to have quantitative data of positive impact. So as I said, this parent actually received the program during the pandemic, but when we surveyed those families who received the program up to 10 years ago, they reported, in comparison to the control families, more effort at social distancing. The mother said that she was putting more effort into social distancing and more effort into helping her child, making sure her child was social distancing. And there was less tension and conflict between family members around the social distancing issues. Parenting, though less harsh parenting and more warmth. Sibling relations, remember I talked about that before. We did not target that at all. We were targeting first-time parents. So there were no siblings involved when they received the program, but the family context was one where sibling relationships were warmer and less conflictual during the pandemic. And parents reported that the children, the oldest child in the family, had less frequent problem behaviors. So I'm kind of wound up talking about the program and the research on it in detail. Now I just want to spend a couple moments telling you how it's spun off several other initiatives and strategies focused on co-parenting since I created this first version. We recently completed a trial of the program delivered through home visits for poor families who were receiving traditional home visiting by a nurse. And then in addition, we engaged them for 10 additional sessions as a couple. And we found positive impact in this trial. And then we created an online version of the program, interactive, where there's engagement, where there are couple exercises when the video pauses, there are written exercises, there are video vignettes, but the parents do it at home on their own. And we ran a small trial with military families. And again, we found positive impact on parents, couple relationship, co-parenting, and infants adjustment. Right now, a colleague I think has just finishing up a trial of a version of the program for teen parents in Texas that's being delivered as a course in a high school. There are 400 or 500 teens involved in this incredibly large trial. We just got funding from NIH, and I should say National Institutes of Health has been very supportive, and that's where I think all of our funding has come from for all of this work so far. And we developed and piloted a program in South Carolina with a statewide agency that focuses on supporting parents who have children with disabilities. We had their volunteers trained in a version of the program for parents who have a young child with autism, and then in a series of 6 visits, provide support both around accessing services for the child, adjusting to the diagnosis, and doing all this together as co-parents. It's the one version of the program that's not targeted at new parents. And we just got funded to start a trial of that program. The pilot data looked really good, and parents from before to after the program improved in a lot of important ways. This is such an important group also because just the level of stress and overwhelming responsibilities, and it is very, very difficult for parents with children with disabilities, and autism often comes with other physical problems, and couples with a child with autism have a much higher likelihood of having high levels of conflict and perhaps also separating and divorcing. A colleague at Penn State just started a project targeting couples where the father is a heavy alcohol user, integrating with another evidence-based program targeting alcohol. Another collaborator at Penn State, I should say the first one is Rena Iden. This Siesta project is led by Doug Teddy, who's done incredible pioneering work on family sleep in the early years. And he's incorporated sleep, how the family manages sleep into the program, because sleep is such an important influence on mental health and physical health. And we have a number of other versions of the program that are under development. I'm right now working on the obesity version, incorporate obesity prevention into the program, because parenthood or the pregnancy is that perinatal period is the highest risk period for women to become obese across the life course. And the first year of infancy sets a stage for physiological, psychological self-regulation and habits that influence, believe it or not, obesity over the life course. And you can see there are other versions that we're developing and targeting. And then there are international projects. The first one was in the United Kingdom, and they're now training agencies who are interested in the program. In Australia, they're also doing that. They're looking to do research. There are several projects, and they're now looking for funding to create a version of the program, an online version of the program delivered through Zoom remotely, person to person, but remotely, not a self-contained interactive kind of version that you don't need a facilitator for, but a one-on-one or a facilitator with a couple version that could be used during the pandemic and then hopefully generalized during other kinds of crises. And remember, they just had a horrible fire season. So we seem to be in a world with increasing crises. At some point I said, this is all great and important, but why focus on co-parenting only in these discrete prevention programs? Shouldn't we be supporting co-parenting, positive parenting teamwork everywhere? And by the way, I never use the phrase co-parenting with parents. I always say parenting teamwork. In the program, we never say the word co-parenting. So all of these areas and domains of society, I think, can be reorganized a little bit to support both parents' involvement. And there are many ways that we could think of to support greater parenting teamwork from early on through childhood and adolescence, not just in discrete kind of classes or online programs. So my idea now is to create a kind of a center or a hub for researchers around the world. I have a network, and those pictures were me visiting some of those countries, of colleagues in almost every continent, I believe, except the coldest one. So I think bringing the researchers together, supporting research teams across countries, also looking at policies and how we can message and promote parenting teamwork in other ways. And just want to end with a final quote from a dad. I just received this earlier today from my Australian colleague, and I'll let you read that for a moment. And then in just a half a moment, I'll stop the screen sharing and answer any questions that you've been able to type in.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for sharing some of your research with us. And we do have some questions that have come in that I will read to you. First of all, what are some of the strategies that Family Foundations promotes, especially when we're living with the stress of COVID? And then a related question to that would be just some daily coping mechanisms to help parents with reducing stress.
Yeah. I briefly mentioned the main ones that I think about. So I think the baseline is taking care of yourself. You know, we talk about being in an airplane and the oxygen mask and putting your own on before you take care of the child. Even though we say first the child, you cannot be a good parent unless you're taking care of yourself. So that means mentally, physically, emotionally, nutritionally, etc. And parents need help with from each other to make time to do that. We did a little bit of research looking at asking parents to report on their experiences every day over the course of 8 days. Actually, the sample that I was talking about. And we found that on days when moms exercise more, they reported more arguments. So the implication is that dads, because dads in the sample were in generally still in society are working more than moms and doing less child and house related work than moms, although there's certainly a lot of variation and differences. But the implication may be that fathers weren't happy with that. So very important to support each other, taking care of your own self. And then secondly, it's very important to spend time together, and whether that means with a professional or just with yourself, taking turns, not interrupting, just hearing and just trying to listen and understand the other one's perspective before reacting. And if you do react, taking a break, taking a time out. I'll be back in 20 minutes. Third, during the pandemic, without evidence, everything I've been saying has evidence behind it. This doesn't really have evidence, but my own experience, and I think other people have also agreed, very important to get some alone time, especially during the shelter-in-place period, and maybe we'll see more of that. Very important for each person to have alone time, even ideally for the other parent to take the children out of the house, so you just have a sense of quiet in the home to balance out the togetherness time.
Self-care is what I keep hearing you say.
Self-care and communication, yeah.
Okay. Another question, what are the first-time parents most surprised by when they first become parents?
Mm-hmm.
Particularly those who thought they were prepared and then realized maybe they weren't.
Yeah.
What are you most surprised by?
Oh, that's a hard one. I never asked them that. But I will say that cartoon that I showed, when I show that to people who are parents, there's a lot of laughter in the room, a lot of recognition. When I show it to students, and I don't teach, I just do research, so I don't often present it to students, but when I do, it's very quiet. They don't realize why that's funny because they haven't had that experience yet. I think the biggest surprise that parents have is just how difficult everything is. Emotionally, physically, that it's just harder than they thought. I don't have any other good answer for that one, sorry.
And you mentioned that you try to stay away from using the word co-parenting and you say teamwork. And we had a few questions about why that is. Can you just address that?
Sure. If people hear the word co-parent, they think, some people think, oh, like equal. Some people think, oh, it's not a family where parents are living together. So that's not a very common word that people don't seem to understand. There's a business that asked me to be a consultant. They're called Co-Parenter, and they provide a digital tool for divorcing parents. So I like the word teamwork also because you can use it as a metaphor. We all have experiences of being on teams, and even if it's just in grade school. And when you're on a team, if you're yelling at another player because they made a mistake, that's not going to help them play better. So the idea is to be supportive and unified, just like any other team.
And we had 3 different questions come in about what seems to be your traditional model in which you use a mother and a father. And you did mention this later in the program that there are other aspects of family foundations that are developing. But have you ever used same-sex couples in your vignettes? And have you thought about how your program might help single parents who have other co-parenting structures, for example, grandparents who help a single parent?
Right. Really good questions that were hard to struggle with, almost 15, 20 years ago. A lot easier now. NIH, in one proposal, wouldn't let us include couples that were not mothers and fathers because it introduced too much variation in their eyes. And maybe you saw that one of the, another colleague, Sam Tornello, and in HDFS in my college, is developing right now a version for same-sex couples. We are accepting, it's, the program when it's implemented and in some of the trials is open to same-sex couples. So, and we did go back and do some video work of same-sex couples. And now that's in the overall program. I didn't show you any of those vignettes. But we probably do need to go back and rework this. This is an incredible amount of material that needs to be reworked every few years as society evolves. We need, people have pointed out that a lot of the vignettes were mothers holding the child, and we didn't want to give that message, so we need to have more father-child interaction in some of the vignettes. We just trained an agency in Brooklyn, a Healthy Start agency, all African-American facilitators serving African-American community. They wanted some minor modification on some of the images, but I want to say that the incredible thing here is all these adaptations we've done, same-sex, race, high risk, poor parents, Latino teens, African-American teens, very, very little needs to be modified in the actual content. Time and time again, we do focus groups, we present the material, and colleagues are leading this. It's not just me, who have been working with these different populations longer than I have. So the core material really applies to most families. Single parents, we encourage to bring some kind of support partner into the program. We haven't included single parents in that context without another parent figure in our trials, but certainly they could benefit from the program.
Hi, Mark and everyone. I'm Lindsay Zaplatal. I'm the assistant director, and Brent just got booted, lost internet. So I'm going to pick up, and we have about 1 minute, Mark. So I think we'll end with one last question, if that's okay.
Sure. Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about, are there plans to take your research and your program to a broader audience? And if so, how can people find that program and how can communities get access to it?
Yeah, great questions. Very difficult issues I've been struggling with for 10 years now. This is a very common theme in the field that we can build prevention programs, but taking them to the next step is very hard. We have a website, famfound.net, where the online program is publicly available. When people hear about us, agencies come to us. We had a long contract with the Department of Defense to train family service providers there. When people come to us, we provide training. What we need is some kind of strategic communication and marketing infrastructure. And, that's a resource that isn't just out there. So my next task is to write some grants to foundations to try to get this out there. The one thing we have going for us, although it's going to take a lot of work to make it happen, is that we could make this program available for reimbursement by health insurance. Often they cover childbirth education, but new prevention mandates, this program would be covered under because we reduce postpartum depression, family violence, and so on, and birth outcomes. That's a great question. And if anybody, for 10 years, I've been looking for a business partner or a nonprofit partner to take on this work.
Yeah.
I'm really good at the research, but I'm not good at the rest of it. Good questions. Thank you.
Well, I just think it's so interesting because as new parents, you don't know what you don't know. And so to be able to help identify what some of those roadblocks might be and what some of those arguments might be can help you kind of think about it in a more clear head.
Yeah.
So, well, on behalf of all of our alumni out there participating, we really appreciate you spending an hour with us. As you all know, it's still sunny where Mark is. He's in California, so he gets to go enjoy the rest of his evening out on the deck. Thank you very much, and stay tuned for our next HHD on location program. It'll be Coffee with Craig, our dean of the college, featuring Joyce Hobson King, our assistant dean for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the college. So that'll be July 16th. Thank you very much, and Mark, have a great evening.
Thank you very much.